Good afternoon, and welcome to the best educational podcast around, Educational Dialogue. We are always happy and excited to welcome our listeners to join us as we provide educators, families, and the community with a space to share knowledge and educational strategies intended to assist each of us with navigating and thriving in the world of education. I am Dr. Reese Roper.
And I am Karen Paysinger. Please remember to like and subscribe as you view us on YouTube and listen to us wherever you get your podcast. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast. That's Educational Dialogue with Dr. Reese Roper and Karen Paysinger.
Thank you so much. All right. So today we have a special guest who is joining us, and she is someone who is near and dear to our hearts. In the past, we have worked together in the same district. And I have even been lucky enough to work beside you, Miss Elizabeth Pratt, as a coordinator with the Access, Equity, and Acceleration Unit. Ms. Pratt has had many years of experience working as a teacher. We were actually assistant principals during the same time. She's been a principal and an administrator and held a number of other positions in the district as well. You know, when you work in education, you wear many, many hats. So today you are in for a treat as we hear from someone who is passionate about addressing the educational and social emotional outcomes for Black students. We are looking forward to hearing from you today with respect to changes you are already making with academic trajectory for Black students, as well as social emotional outcomes as well. But before we dive into our questions, we'd like you to please share just a little bit about yourself with our listeners. Please welcome Miss Elizabeth Pratt.
Well, thank you so much, Reese and Karen. And like you said, I believe that we all hold a place for one another in our hearts. And while you mentioned a lot of positions that I have held in the district, I think the most important position that can relate to your audience is that I too am a parent navigating this educational world. So I am really excited about the dialogue that we are going to have here today. Yes, I have had the privilege of working for LA Unified for the past 27 years in a variety of capacities. I am known to have led some of the toughest schools in the district. So I am really excited about having this conversation about what we can do to continuously keep helping our Black to thrive. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for giving us a little bit of your background. So let's dive into it. Let's get started. So I'd like to just bring up an article that I read in EdSource in regards to LAUSD considering making adjustments to some specific work that's being done for our African American students. I don't know, the article came out last week. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
If you describe it a little bit, I think it was speaking to the work of the BSAP department. Is that correct? Is that the article you're referring to?
Yeah. So I know that's not your department, but I know you guys probably work closely together. I'd like to know, what are your thoughts about how you believe our Black students are faring at this time, and what might be some of the barriers that you feel hinder academic success for our Black students?
You know, there are so many different ways that you can approach that topic. Number one, we'll start with your first part of your question. How do I think African American or Black students are faring in our district? Unfortunately, I really think it depends on what region the school you attend is in, what opportunities you are exposed to, what opportunities your parents know to seek out for you. And if by chance you are not one of those students who parents speak to others and find other opportunities and seek out other opportunities, unfortunately, a lot of times our students are not faring well. And I think some of the reasons or obstacles really has to do with the teaching. I think, unfortunately, we are at a time that we have teachers that are in our classrooms that might not necessarily be the best person for a particular neighborhood that they are in. And so in turn, they don't build relationships. And I think we all can agree, if you do not build relationships with our students and make them feel that you expect, really, my word I would use is demand the best that they can give you, then unfortunately, I think that you see where our students a lot of times are not faring well, because in turn, they don't care. The teacher then interprets that attitude or behavior is that they cannot achieve. And so there you have the ball beginning to roll.
So I'd like to ask a question just to piggyback on what you said. So yes, Karen and I, we've had some other guests come on and we often talk about those relationships. I know when I started in education, it was, probably just a given that a part of your job as an educator, as a teacher, was that you were really going to work with students and build those relationships. What would you think are those things that might be hindering that from happening in today's times, I guess I would say? Because I know that when I started many years ago, I won't say how many, but many years ago, it just feels like that, like the classroom was like the place where students really came and knew that they were going to be taken care of, and parents really believed that their child in that room was going to get the best.
Yes.
So what do you think might be some of those changes that are currently creating barriers? And then what might we do to build out those relationships again?
So, I really wish we almost had a teacher here, because while I am knowledgeable about some of the things that are going on and what is expected of teachers right now, I'm not right there at the front line, so to speak. But I think, number one, teachers are overwhelmed with testing. They are overwhelmed with what the results are that they are expected to deliver. And I think back when we were teaching, we had more of a choice to choose where we wanted to be. We applied for those particular schools. So we knew what schools we were going into. We knew the community, and you stated it beautifully. We felt that was our duty to build those relationships. And so I think some of it might now be that some teachers don't think it's their duty to build relationships. It's almost as though they expect the students to build a relationship with them. Very often you hear teachers blaming a child for their circumstances. And in the various schools that I have worked at, I always share with my own children, look how fortunate you are. You don't have to worry about what you're going to eat for dinner tonight, if you're going to have clean clothes to be able to come to school, if the lights are going to be on when you come home to do your homework. They never had to worry about any of those things. And I think sometimes, and to be perfectly honest with you, not just teachers, probably some administrators too, you do not have empathy for what your students are having to deal with. And in turn, perhaps if you have that empathy, then in turn, you might be able to understand some of the behaviors that you are seeing. And then really be able to get around the table and come up with some good strategies that perhaps you could then see that you would be able to build those relationships and then in turn see those students perform better academically.
Mhm. You know, the thing that I always, and Karen, I know you've got another question. I just got to get in there.
No, go ahead. This is great.
You know, there's another, as you were talking, something came to my mind that we often speak about where we have worked. But when we look at the statistics or data, we find that this is nationwide, that, you know, students are, or this empathy is not necessarily in place. We've talked for many, many years, I think, nationwide about culture and oh gosh, I can't even remember what it used to be called, but you know, things around, you know, diversity and all of that. And I know that there's an Instagram person, and one of her slogans is "Stop playing diversity." And so, and I often think about, you know, we talk a good game, but are we really doing what we say we think are the best things that are there for students and stuff? And it's not just in one place, it's like everywhere. So what are your thoughts about, and I can only speak about public education, what are your thoughts about where we're headed with public education?
Ooh, that's scary, huh? You know, we know that there has to be a system, right, to be able to educate the masses. But where are we headed? I mean, when I really just ponder on that, and again, let me be clear, my career has been in Los Angeles Unified, which is a monster of a district. And in various trainings and so forth that I have attended, and I have been amongst other people in other districts that are much smaller, they can't even imagine how do we wrap ourselves around, you know, each community, each city to be able to service our students. But I do know this, there's going to have to be some disruption if we want to see different outcomes. And just like you stated, Sharice, we're playing diversity. That's a cute caption, but I often wonder, we talk about the same problems from when I entered education, and that was 27 years ago. We are still talking about what do we need to do to close the achievement gap? How can we close the achievement gap? The door still needs to be closed for the same two populations, African American and Latinx. So you have to then begin to wonder, is there some setup throughout the whole entire system, not just the educational system, to continue to keep certain populations at bay from achieving what we deem perhaps as the American dream? And we'll let a few of you achieve, because then it doesn't seem as though there's some major idea going on within the system. So where are we headed? I don't know, but I know if there are not some change agents coming along the way and some disruptors, it's not going to be a very good place.
Yes.
I know Dr. Reese and I were kind of talking about the same thing yesterday. And, you know, my response to it is, because I agree, we've been talking about this gap almost forever. And so, you know, I'm thinking, well, shoot, we probably need just to blow up the whole thing and start all over. But we can do that But if you're hiring people that have a mindset that certain groups of people, maybe are less than or cannot learn, or that there is some type of deficit, then you're going to get the same thing. And I mean, over my years as an educator, I have attended so many professional development workshops and all these things about changing your mindset. But if a person doesn't want to change their mindset, they won't. And so, unfortunately, some of those people are in front of our children.
Right.
And so, it's almost like, I agree. I do. It's kind of like a conspiracy theory, thinking that, some folks may only want just a few of us to thrive. And then, because you always have to have worker bees. You always have to have somebody, doing the grunt work. And so, I know it kind of sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I kind of agree.
Right.
But if you speak to other people in other fields, business, entertainment, and you can go on and on, you will hear some of the same conversations being had about opportunities, achievement, and so forth.
Right.
So it definitely spans, it definitely has a further reach than just education.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was in just doing, a little research for today's topic. I was reading some excerpts from this book, Beyond Acting White, by Erin McNamara. And she quotes a lot of research from John Ogbu. And they were, talking about between, I want to say, 1965 to maybe, I'm sorry, no, not that far. I'm looking at my notes. From about, 1965 to about 1992, they were saying the gap between standardized test scores narrowed between Black and white students. And they were attributing this narrowing of the gap to the civil rights movement and, families expressing the importance of education, and you have to be better than, and 2 steps ahead, and, all of that. And then they were saying, all of a sudden, things just kind of sort of started to shift, where some students' mindsets were that, all right, if I'm going to be academically successful, that's like being white. So, and I know you all have heard,
Stop talking
about
like you
acting white. Yes.
Right.
And so they were saying that, some of the students, especially some of the college students, were like, well, if we really become academically successful, then we may lose part of our culture, and we don't want that. So we're just gonna kind of like hang back and just maybe do the bare minimum. And so this somehow got into the press, and then of course, how the press goes. They run wild with it. And now there's this thing about acting white. And so, which is one of the reasons why some of our African American students don't do so well, or maybe a reason why that there's this achievement gap. So do you think this holds true today, that acting white or not being academically successful is one of the reasons for the achievement gap today?
Well, when you were saying about we have to be 2 steps better or more prepared and so forth, I mean, think about it. I still share that with my children now, right? So, as they say, it's that old black tax, right? We don't seem to get away from that black tax. But when you were speaking, Karen, I was just thinking to myself, if in fact that was a concept that came from us as African Americans, right? If we then deem that if we're successful, that's acting white, and then if we're unsuccessful, that's us then paying homage to our culture. I just don't know if I can believe that we came up with that nonsense, and the question, you asked was, do I believe that attributes to the achievement gap? Do I think that our young folks want to hold fast to their culture? And especially now, when we're in a culture that more so now than when I was coming up. I mean, you can wear your braids, you can wear your natural hair. Even with our, young men, you can truly be your authentic self, per se. That is the impression you get amongst the business world now. I just don't know if I'm ready to say that our people as a whole, we would then deem that we would remain status quo because that's us keeping to our culture. I almost think, as silly as it sounds, Karen, that's probably something else that has been put out there in order, because that would be something that folks would jump on that bandwagon. I don't want to be acting white. And we had a training today, and I asked one of the parents today, who is the person or the persons that get to deem what is right? Who gets to deem that? I know as parents, we say we get to deem what happens in our house because we're the boss, because we're paying the bills, right? So who in fact then gets to deem for a whole culture, this is the right way and the way that you're doing it is the wrong way? So it very well could have something to do with the achievement gap. But then again, I would have to point the finger back to us as educators, that then we should have classroom environments that students feel safe enough to be able to dialogue about that the same way that we are right now, and to get them to understand it's not about being white, purple, red, or black. It's about doing whatever you need to do in order to be successful, for you to be able to have the opportunities to have the type of life and lifestyle that you would like.
I think as I'm listening, I think one of the things that just struck me is the idea that we all know that. I mean, it was not, when Karen said the whole notion of thinking about how you speak white or how you're acting white, that was not new. It was like nothing like we were like, oh, I'm so surprised about that, right? That's something that we have grown up with, and it's still there today. I remember my son coming home one day saying, some of the kids say I talk funny. Why are they saying that? And that was a real question for him, because he didn't recognize that there was something else happening, right? But he had a mother that was a teacher. So I'm teaching him academic English, right? And so, but at home we could still get down with whatever we need to get down with, right? But there was that conversation that we were able to have because I was the mother and an educator, and could understand where he was coming from. But I think it goes back even to when we were talking a little bit a while ago about the teachers. If you have not been trained to know that your home language or your culture, that is okay, then you're spending your time in class telling kids that no, that's wrong. So then kids are walking around thinking, well, okay, well, why is that wrong? What is she saying? When I go home, I'm not going to tell my mother that the teacher said I'm wrong for saying, you know, some of the things that we just naturally, that conversation just naturally happens that way. So then I think you get into this little internal kind of place where you're like, okay, so if I'm wrong, and then think about this too. Most of my teachers coming up, in elementary, I can only remember one Black teacher that I had.
Yep. Me
and
too.
you can remember one. I don't remember any.
I remember her. She had a nice afro too. I liked it. She was
Yeah.
she was so cool to me. But and I was one of the lucky ones who was able to have her, because all Black kids didn't have her. She was a great teacher. But just think about that. If we don't have, if we have not been trained, if we have not taken seriously the professional development that talks about biases, that talks about all of these things, we're just clicking off the box, because most stuff is done electronically now.
Yes.
You watch it online. You can't ask any questions. You just click, click, click to get it done. And then you go back to teaching the way you've been teaching. So that to me is a big problem. And we talk about providing these PDs around biases and culture and all of that. But then I think we don't have enough folks to really hold us accountable to doing what we say that we've learned.
Well, you know what else? Not just that we don't have enough folks to hold us accountable, you don't have enough people to replace. So if I'm going to move Sharice out, I don't have anybody in the wings to replace Sharice. And so in turn, then I start convincing myself about how bad you really aren't, because you're better than having no one there at all. And so I think that we even have to begin speaking about, is education even a field that is appealing for our younger generation to enter into?
Well, we already know the answer to that, because we can't now. No one in the country can get enough people to even hire as teachers, and you know, the colleges are talking about how few students are applying to liberal arts studies, or you know, whatever, to be teachers.
And so the reality is you're not making enough money.
I was just going to say
that, but if I'm in college,
there has to be some dialogue about why aren't they attractive?
Right. It's the lowest paid professional job in the country, right?
You have to spend money to get your degrees in order to teach.
Yes.
Where you have so many careers now that are more lucrative than an educator, and they don't need all of the schooling that you had to pay for in order to get your credentials to do that. So, you know, I don't know, ladies, your educational dialogue will probably be going on for centuries. Each time you begin speaking about one thing, then another topic, you know, comes up. And so I just keep going back and pondering on the question you asked first, Reese. Where do I see public education going?
Right. So I'm gonna throw something else at you. You ready?
I might not catch it. What you got?
So we also know that, and this spurs back to that first question, that Prop 209 has the attention right now is about not supporting one particular culture, one particular race. And I mean, right now they would probably say, oh, they're only talking about Black students right now. But in your words, why does race and culture matter? Why do you think that it matters as much as we believe that it matters? When, what do you think about what they're doing, which is why they're having this conversation about, the Black Student Achievement Plan in LAUSD, because they're trying to, this little loophole, back to that conspiracy, right? That you can't have talk about and just think about only one culture or one race.
But if you have some federal compliance mandates to it, then you could focus on that one group. But anyway, what you asked me was about race and culture. So first, I will just answer simply about why does race and culture matter to me? And it's really quite simple. And then we'll get into how it then spins off into other areas. But race and culture is important because race lets you know who I am. It tells you about my identity. I remember a few years ago, one of the radio stations, their line was no color lines. And I used to think to myself, no color lines? Well, when you first see me, what do you see? You see a Black woman. What do you mean no color lines? I'm not pink, orange, or purple. I am a fair-skinned Black woman. That's what you're going to see. And I don't want you to put that out of your mind because that is a huge part of who I am. It, gives you some insight and perhaps the road I had to travel and decisions I had to make and why, right? And then culture matters because the way you see me in turn then is kind of the way I have to maneuver within the various cultures that I play a part in, right? You have a culture at home that you have a certain role you play in. You have a culture, if you go to church, there's a certain culture and you have a certain role there. In your workplace, there's a certain culture and a certain role. So, just easily stated, I think that all of these various cultures then in some shape or form dictate how then you interact with your surroundings, with that culture, right? And when we speak about helping one particular group or not, right? The part that I just cannot wrap my head around is the conversation comes from a place as though everyone was on an equal playing field to begin with. And that we were all on an equal playing field, and all of a sudden, we needed affirmative action to help us step up higher than everybody else. That makes absolutely no sense.
Right.
We know that, and not just us as African Americans, other nationalities as well. You can talk about gender and so forth. We are not and have not been on an equal playing field. You guys have been speaking about the data. The data shows if we all have been dealing or functioning from an equal playing field, then why, as you stated earlier, Karen, has this achievement gap been around as long as we all just got into education? Right? So, when you really sit and ponder on some of it, again, it just makes me go back to what is the real situation, or what is the real objective of all these various things? Because they somehow, some way, all tie in together. And it reminds me of that, Tyler Perry show, the have and the have-nots.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. When we talk about the achievement gap, sometimes I think about how the researchers, how they get their data. And I'm thinking, you know, there's always this comparison between Black students and white students. But do they really break down the Black students and the white students by socioeconomic levels? Because I'm wondering, how do your lower economic white students fare on these assessments?
If we were probably to look at some of those districts, that is the population that they serve, I would venture to say that you would find that they are probably on the low end of their achievement gap. So if you were to look at some of those districts that probably serve, you have your middle class to upper class whites, you have your lower class whites. I think you can automatically, even though we don't have the data right in front of us, you can automatically probably assume that those lower income whites are at the bottom of the achievement gap.
And, you know, we talked too about how you really, that's another place where you really have to come to understand in any district where you have like pockets of students that are economically disadvantaged, that there has to be a different, there has to be different strategies and different supports. And often we find that, you know, we're just giving everybody the same thing. We hear about, you know, now it's this whole talk about all these community schools and community, all these things that are happening to support and serve the communities. But I wonder all the time, what are the different things that they're going to provide in those different communities where there are clearly different obstacles and challenges that have to be
different needs.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that what happens is, you know, that there's different needs, but meanwhile, the central office of that district is still expecting the same outcomes and for you to operate within the same strategies as everyone else. So until you know that you really do have some flexibility to do things a little differently, it's not until you know that you have that flexibility that I think you're going to see real changes.
Right.
Well, and that's the thing. Oftentimes, you know, we get all these, you know, these PDs, instructions, you know, curriculums, and everything that's coming from central office to everyone, and we have to do it. We have to teach it or present it in a way that's presented to us. And if we differentiate, then, you know, either we're penalized or someone comes in and say, no, you're not supposed to do it like that. And it's like, but I'm tailoring it to the needs of my population. The way it's written does not work for my students. And so, you know, I think until administrators are given the okay to think out of the box, because really, honestly, if we want to close the gap, we have to think out of the box. We can't do what everybody does because it doesn't work.
Right.
So until I think administrators, educators are given the go-ahead to think out of the box, I don't even know if we'll be able to close the gap.
Exactly.
And then
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I have a friend. She's long retired. She was an elementary school principal at a school in Watts, and she was, you know, she would this woman would work 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I mean, it really almost kind of made her sick. Working to make a difference with her students, because she was talking about the generations of students. Her school served one of the projects in Los Angeles. I think it was Nickerson Gardens. And she was talking about how there were generations of families who have come through her school. But she told me about all the different programs and what she did differently outside of what the school district asked her to do. And she's like, girl, I was in trouble all the time. Folks were always writing me up. She's like, I didn't even care. What I did worked. My scores increased. My students were learning. She said, you have to think out of the box to get results. And that's what she did. I mean, it almost drove her to her grave, but that's what she did. And so, you know, you got to do something different. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Right. And especially because we know that data is collected from universities and other biased institutions, and that data is not always meant for us to make significant changes in the right direction. Right.
That's right.
So that leads me to something that's right in your wheelhouse, Ms. Pratt.
Oh, goodness. Now, I do want you to remember that one of us on this screen is still working, okay?
No, this one actually, I think you'll enjoy this question. I know this, the question is about something that I worked on with you. One of the changes that your unit is trying to, or has tried to establish and make a difference has to do with our students that are African American and gifted. And you have a Gifted Enrichment Academy that was specifically established in the beginning to help close that gap in terms of the number of students being identified as gifted students. We know that there are a lot of students out there that are Black that are doing great things. And for some reason, they just aren't being identified with the assessments that are currently being used. So can you tell our audience a little bit about what you are doing to try to at least close that gap?
Well, you know, somebody would have almost suggested that I paid you to ask me that question. We are currently going to be implementing a new program where we are working with elementary schools that are our academic English mastery program schools that have a disproportionality of African American students being identified for giftedness. And we are going to work with those schools. I believe it is now up to 16 schools that we're going to be working with. 16 schools, 5 to 8 students per school, where they are going to be working on a leadership portfolio to be able to get identified under the leadership category.
Right.
And I know listeners might think, okay, well, that's not a big deal, but it really truly is, because very often the reason our students get overlooked for giftedness is because they are trying to identify kids just with taking an exam. So because I might not pass that exam does not mean that I don't have gifted abilities in other areas. The arts, dancing, writing, singing, leadership. And we know very often some of those students that give you the most problems in elementary school, if you work with them and give them strategies and approach them differently, as you ladies have been speaking about throughout this hour, they will show you that they have leadership skills. And in turn, then, you can teach them and show them how to work about becoming a change agent within their community, something that they are passionate about, that they would like to see changed, and that they could make a difference within their own community. So we are very excited about that.
Nice,
Awesome.
nice. I know when I was a principal, we tried to work on some things around leadership and
Mhm.
making sure that we put that in a portfolio so that
Yes,
Mhm.
those students could have that portfolio as a way to be identified. And
yes,
you know, you'd be surprised even just the small things. As a teacher, I used to always make sure that everyone in the class had a job. So I wasn't,
Mhm.
mostly I didn't want to do all the work, right? Picking up the papers and all that stuff. But
Well, it's their classroom too.
that's right.
right, right. And I also realized that for some of those students who never got picked for this or never got picked for that, that it allowed everyone to show some form of leadership in some way. It was small, not enough for
Yes,
a portfolio, but just the beginnings of, letting students know that they can lead just like anyone else can lead. So I
exactly.
love that for African American students and other students that are underserved as well.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes,
Mhm. Mhm.
yes,
So we know that in your Department of um, Access and Equity, you also work with UCLA. And there's a UCLA collaborative. Could
yes.
you explain how this program works and how it best supports Black high school students in reaching their college goals?
So I think the most exciting component of that program, and Sharice, you chime in too, because you were very instrumental with that program too. But um, I think two of the best resources are number one, African American students having a front row view of people that are willing to support them, help them, and tell them explicitly what they need to do to be competitively eligible to get into these four-year universities.
Mm-hmm.
And then here recently, we had a professional development where they broke down an actual application and gave us insight about what they're looking for, what their thoughts are, and so forth. And so that was really just fantastic because they shared with how, like, say, for instance, student goes to Hopeful School, comes out with a 4.3, and they're a great student, but they are competing globally to get into the number one university.
Mm-hmm.
And so a 4.3 at Hopeful is great and fantastic. But now when you're competing with all of these other students to get into UCLA, now a 4.3 might be average, right? And so now we have to realize that we then need to make not just the students, our parents aware that they need to be kind of planning out or thinking about their course of action in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I know parents probably think, what, in middle school? But you want your students to be getting involved, having experiences that they can show that leadership, that they come up and can write about experiences, that they can share their voice when they're writing their essays and so forth. So I'm really elated to be a part of the UCLA LAUSD collaborative. As you stated, Karen, it gives 28 high schools, those students, the opportunity to work directly with folks from UCLA that time and time again show how much they care. The newly retired provost, Yolanda Copeland Morgan, she would go to the high schools when these students had been accepted to UCLA.
Oh, wow.
And I would
Awesome.
tell the parents that were there with the students, do you know how much this says about this school?
Mm-hmm.
Any of the other schools that your students have been accepted to, is their vice provost of the university coming down to congratulate your child?
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. And Karen, and she was an African American woman. So what a tremendous role model that was. And
Mm-hmm.
then when we went to Crenshaw, we learned that she was a Crenshaw Cougar graduate.
Oh.
So can you just imagine how it made those students feel that you can achieve, right? You definitely probably gonna have some obstacles along the way, but if you want to achieve, you can do it.
And I'm going to add, and I was always saying this, that it really begins in elementary, because to be on track and
you didn't say
school,
elementary, what would you say?
I would say preschool.
Preschool. College begins in preschool.
It does. But you certainly are trying to really make sure that by elementary, before they leave, those students, that they really are able, to understand, to be able to share what they've learned and how they're learning, to have good comprehension. That's a part of that understanding.
Right.
Because sometimes you can write and you can do, but do you understand what you wrote? Because when you get to the assessment pieces, those are the things that you need to do. And now I say all the time, and it's not even just for college, because now there's all these opportunities to do things that, to be an entrepreneur. But to be an entrepreneur, you have to have that tenacity to be able to move from one thing to the next and to understand, because it's more about you. The work. You're not having somebody push you, right? And so you have to be able to push yourself. You have to persevere. You have to know that you have to be able to, articulate and speak well and all of that. And speaking well doesn't mean speaking white. It just means that people understand what you're able to say. Right? If I don't understand what you said, I don't care how you said it.
That's right.
Right. And you're articulating it in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
Your how you present it is it makes sense.
Right. And we spoke about that today. It's about situational appropriateness. In this particular situation, how do I need to address the audience in order for them to understand what I'm trying to convey?
Correct. Yes. And as a leader, we'll go back to that leadership piece. How do you also ask for support? Right? Students can, you can't sit and not ask. If I don't understand, I have to ask a question so that I can understand better.
Yes.
And if I'm not getting it in the classroom, then sometimes I have to go somewhere else to make sure that I get it. But I can't walk around and not get what I need to be able to be my best self moving forward.
Yes. And that's another component that UCLA teaches incoming students. There is a plethora of opportunities for you to get all type of assistance, and even for your professors. But just as Sharice just stated, you have to ask. You have to go and seek that opportunity. That opportunity is not going to just come and knock on the door for you.
Right. Squeaky wheel gets the oil.
That's correct. That is correct.
Right. Now you mentioned, and you could go on. We probably have to call you and to have you come back. You mentioned the Academic English Mastery Program. And I know specifically that it tackles a lot of areas. Academic English mastery, of course, but also different culturally responsive ways to do and be. Can you maybe just share one thing or something that you'd like to share with us that you think we should know, as we're kind of getting closer to the end of our time, but I want to make sure that you share some information about Academic English Mastery and the importance of this program.
Well, I think that the importance of this program, and especially tying in with the topics that we have tackled today, there is something that you call validating and affirming the culture you come to the classroom with. So the best example is culture is not like a jacket or a sweater that you wear, that you take it off when you're coming into the classroom, hang it up, and pick it up on your way out. Your culture remains with you. And so, as we were speaking earlier about that, we think one of the big components to students being successful academically is teachers building relationships. And so what does that mean? That means that teachers first have to begin with validating the culture that I come to school with, teaching me about that there are different ways to speak depending upon the situation, not demeaning me or looking at me from a deficit mindset, as you spoke on earlier, Karen. It's just that you need, as the teacher, to be equipped to show me and teach me that the way I speak with my cousins and my mother might not be the way that I need to speak in the classroom, because in the classroom, we're using academic English.
Mm-hmm.
And at home, I'm using my home language. Neither one is wrong. Matter of fact, it's a bonus for you to master both so that you can begin to what they term code switch. And they've really gotten away now from that term and really are just saying situational appropriateness. And then again, not just validating my culture. So, I come to the classroom who I am, but then you want to validate that so that I in turn feel good about myself. And now when you're teaching me and working with me, you're getting the best me, because I feel that you see me, you hear me, you appreciate me. And in turn, then if you express that you want me to do the best, then I in turn want to give you the best. So I think those are the key points that definitely just accentuated what we were speaking about throughout this past hour.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just talking about that, what you all are doing with the academic English mastery program, and knowing that we have to make sure our schools are providing an equitable environment. Could you quickly do you have any suggestions that would help our parents to prepare their child to be successful in academically in school? Because we know that a child's first teacher is their parent.
Yes.
And so what suggestions would you give parents?
So I would say parents, quickly, number one, be a partner to your school. You might not like everything that's going on at the schools. I didn't always like everything that was going on at the school my children attended. But you want to get in there and get some understanding. Become familiar with your teacher. Let your teacher know how much you care about your child and their academic success. I know probably parents, you're thinking, well, they should just assume that. Don't let them assume that. Let them hear from you, because then that way you're holding them accountable as well. And then, like the old saying, you attract more flies with honey than you do salt. So you first want to go and how can I help? If you have the availability to go in and offer time, speak to the principal, make sure the principal knows who you are. All of my parents that I knew weren't troublemakers. Some of my principals, I'd like to see them coming because, hey, Ms. Pratt, how you doing today? That in turn brightened up your day. If you knew you needed to get something done at your school site, you could count on those parents. So again, going back to the first point you ladies made, parents, you want to make certain you are building relationships at the schools that your children attend. So then that way you can go about finding out all those other things and seeking assistance. If you need assistance, I'm sure you have friends or relatives that can help you, but make sure that they know how important the education of your child is to you, to your family, and most importantly, to the student, because of the future opportunities that it will open up for them.
Well, Miss Pratt, we are just so excited that you joined us today. We will be calling you to come back because, as you know, there is so much more to discuss when it comes to making sure that African American or Black students are thriving
Yes.
and really being successful in school. So we thank you again, and we hope that you will join us. Well, I know you, so you got to come back. I'll tell you what.
Well, thank you both. I certainly have enjoyed this hour of conversation. It is always good to dialogue and to have more than one opinion so you can continue learning and growing in your journey as well. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Don't forget to like and subscribe and view us on YouTube. We're so glad that you were here. Don't forget to also download Educational Dialogue with Dr. Reese and Karen Paysinger. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Have a good afternoon and have a great day. And thank you so much, Dr. Reese and Karen Paysinger. And thank you, Elizabeth Pratt. Very good, great, outstanding conversation, as always. And folks, don't forget to join Dr. Reese, Karen Paysinger, second and fourth Wednesdays of every single month, the Educational Dialogue. And you can listen, download their show, YouTube, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. So thank you for joining us. Have a good afternoon. And folks, stay tuned at 5 o'clock. It's time for Hump Day Wednesday, all the hot topics, all the things that you want to talk about. And we've got Gary Hines from the Sounds of Blackness. They are contenders for a Grammy. They're going to be right here on the Intentional Talk Radio Network. So join us at 5 o'clock, Black Women Speak, with, of course, me, Colette Williams, Kenny Hendricks, and Gary Hines from the Sounds of Blackness. We're going to have a good time. We'll talk with you soon. Take care. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good evening. All right. Hey, Yolanda. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. How's everybody doing?
Doing fine, thank you. I was
Great.
like,
All
okay, do I
right, that was
log
awesome.
off or do I stay?
No, it's okay. Good. It's good to see everybody. You know what? I have